Good morning. This is Dr. Matthew Dunn, host of The Future of Email, with my first, and I'm delighted to say this, repeat guest, Chris Marriott, CEO of Email Connect and well-known expert in the email vendor and technology space. Chris, yay, we get to do this again.
I did not know I was the first repeat. So
You're the first repeat. Well, and for those of you listening, Chris and I have had a chance to actually meet live. Oh, novel idea. And some in-depth conversations at a recent conference. Like we need to have this conversation kind of in public.
yeah,
I think was the impulse. Email Connect, in brief, you guys are the go-to experts for RFPs for companies who are changing horses. Yes.
in the martech space, and it started. Our focus started, when we started the company 10, 11 years ago, was really on ESPs, on the ESP platform. But as you and I have been talking about more recently, with the emergence of CDPs, or at least that label, I think they're called DMPs before that. But with the emergence of CDPs and how they've begun to take on the characteristics of ESPs and vice versa, we now also are operating in the CDP space and helping brands in those selections as well.
Okay. Oh, that makes sense. So, so you had that wonderful presentation at that recent conference that both of us attended, and you laid out the evolution and the oh, look, we were 2 years, or you were 2 years ahead of major analysts. But I was thinking about this last night, the fact that I had a chance to talk with you about this again, and wanted to try framing the initial part of the discussion with this question. It seemed to me one way of looking at the ESP, as we know it, the email platform, is we thought it was for sending email, and now it turns out it may be more fundamentally for managing and understanding our customer relationships, customer history, customer data. Any reaction to that?
Absolutely. The ESP platform, in some ways, is like the evolution of the cell phone. When cell phones first started, they were, for making phone calls.
Yeah.
And now in the era of smartphones, that's like an afterthought. If somebody calls you, you're almost say, "Are you kidding me? Text me," or something else. So, and I think with ESP platforms, to your point, absolutely the sending of email is still the critical core function of it. But to your point, to really be competitive today, it needs to have taken on the characteristics of a lot of other things that at one time or another were considered essential.
Were considered essential. And I'm seizing on your point. Some of the biggest DSPs don't actually send the email anymore.
Well, right. I mean, if you're going to say the actual sending is done by an MTA,
right,
then you're right. A lot of the new next gen platforms and what the Customer Data Institute calls deployment CDPs, and we'll get to what are those? all use what we call. And David Daniels is the first person I've heard coin this phrase, MTAs in the cloud. Where what the difference is there, folks, is that historically, let's call them legacy ESPs, had their own MTAs as part of their sending infrastructure. So they had their platform and the MTAs, and they were all in one place. And they were, they bought the MTAs from the MTA sellers. But those MTA sellers, oh, lo and behold, suddenly offered those same MTA services cloud-based. So to your point, Matthew, suddenly you have really a key differentiator of between next gen platforms and legacy platforms, in my mind, is that difference. When you talk about, well, who's using MTAs in the cloud? Cordial, Braze, Iterable, Klaviyo, Core, all of these, what are considered some of the next gen platforms are doing exactly that. And, to the point where you have to say, well, is anybody, I mean, is that the way the industry is going? And I think it might be, but But, and I'm going to zig a little to get back in, because the reason, I reached out to you last week and said, we have to have this call
Yeah, yeah.
now, or do this podcast now, is also because you pointed out what Twilio is doing in assembling their stack. And Twilio, folks, has is own SendGrid, which is the leading, and by leading I mean largest, or actually I don't know, SparkPost or SendGrid are
Second, yeah, SparkPost SendGrid, tell you a big good battle.
yeah, big battle. But what you pointed out to me that had been sort of nagging in the back of my mind, but when you laid it out, you have the biggest or second biggest MTA in the cloud taking steps that are going to put them in competition with a lot of the people who are using them as MTAs in the cloud.
And one of those steps, because you and I both know it, and we forget we know it. One of those steps is that same company, Twilio, bought one of the bigger CDPs in the market, Segment.
Yeah, exactly. So now they already had leading mobile products.
Yeah.
And now they have the CDP platform, which can perform the segmentation, list building, data storing that you expected in ESP. And now they have so, as you and I said right before we went live here, that in my business, I've never looked at, in the RFPs we run, and we mainly work with big centers, big volume centers. We work with the 1-800-Flowers and the American Airlines, Bed Bath & Beyond. So big, sophisticated email. And it would have been inconceivable to me at any point up until now to think that Twilio or SendGrid or any part of that company would be somebody to maybe look at in an RFP with one of these large, complex senders. But when you see what they've assembled now, as I said, I think there's going to come a day sooner rather than later where Twilio will be able to compete at those enterprise deals because they've basically become a ESP, full service, a full on ESP, not just separate components. And that, I think that's a fascinating development. And it gets also to, that collision between CDPs and ESPs, and how CDPs, they can bolt that into their infrastructure underneath SendGrid. And with the mobile capabilities, as you pointed out,
which is where they started, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And say that looks an awful lot like an enterprise ESP.
And one of the logical sidebars of this is MessageBird, who have bought SparkPost, not quite a year ago. If they haven't built or acquired a big CDP, that seems like a logical thing to watch for on the basis of this conversation. Jim Barksdale was co-founder of Netscape along with Mark and Teresa, and he probably gets credited with a quote that someone else also said, but he said, there's only two ways to make money in business. One is bundling and the other is unbundling. And really, we're talking through all this list of capabilities involved in this thing called email and email marketing. And first gen ESPs had presented it as a bundle, right? Here's the things you need. We've got all of them. And then the MTA started peeling out the sending of mail function, and companies like B, partner of ours, have terrific email editors. So the design side of it, we'll peel that out. And ESPs who are left as a bundle are starting to maybe look legacy. Doesn't mean they are, but maybe they look that way because you think you can buy all the pieces off the shelf and then stitch them together yourself. I think you made a comment about that, like the sort of, we'll put all those pieces together. It's always going to be the IT guys thinking it's that easy. And it's not actually going to be that easy. So the notion of a company rebundling those capabilities, which I think where we're going with the Twilio conversation, is interesting.
I think it's the only way to go, because, and I think you make a great point. You have these, email editors, and you have orchestration platforms
Yep.
that are
Yep.
separate. You have the MTAs in the cloud, and ESPs are sitting there looking around and saying, you know, what is our core? What do we need to?
What do we do?
And that's the CDPs part, and that's where the CDPs then are coming in and saying, you know what, hey, we can do that if when push comes to shove. So I think the ESPs are looking around to your point and saying, no. We need to it all in one place is better. And I firmly believe that's true, because integration, even if it's out of the box, because the other thing we saw is, speaking about bundling together, taxi for email.
Right.
That was Spark Post, right?
Leading edge, arguably leading edge editor design tool set built originally by an agency, Elliot's agency. I had him on this podcast. Got bought by Spark Post, and about a day later, Spark Post acquired by MessageBird.
Right.
So MessageBird has the design piece and the big MTA.
All they're missing, right? All they're missing is the CDP. So I bet you're right. If we knew which that CDP was, maybe we could get in there.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
But when there's a billion CDPs, who knows which way they're going to go? But yeah,
which intrigues me. Like the label's not that old, and all of a sudden you can't even list the companies in the category. Like, and they're fast at that.
Yeah, well, and I think for those at home, the CDP, every single analyst has different labels and categories of them. And, Gartner has smart hubs, Forrester has this and that. I think CDP Institute has the best categorization. They have 4 categories of them. And so if you really want to, if you want to learn about CDPs and the differences between them, that's a good place. David Rabin is CDP Institute. I have a ton of respect for him. You'd be an interesting guy to get on your program if you have at it.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a great idea.
But yeah, in fact, interesting you say, I just last week set up a conversation between an enterprise ESP and another email editor, because I've been telling ESPs for years, brands are looking for these capabilities in the platform, and a lot of the platforms still have have built pretty good WYSIWYG editors, but what they don't have, and that these like Be Free and Stencil and Taxi for Email had, were the collaborative tools, so that you didn't have to send things back and forth. It was like a Google Docs for email, and it makes that much faster, much easier, and those are still lacking in enterprise platforms. So I was, my message to the ESP was, talk to these guys, look at them, and think long and hard if they want to be acquired, to acquire them. Because again, I think ultimately innovation in the ESP space starts with third parties and eventually ends up either the leading platforms buy them and bring them in,
right,
or they build it themselves. And so there's a lifespan of these third party innovations where they either got to get bought or the ESPs are going to go, we don't need
bundling, unbundling. I should do a quick call out for the guys at Chameleon out of Hungary. Also a really good design tool for email. And I love the fact that there's some competition and innovation, even in what looks like it should be an easy thing. It's not. Designing an email, and things like you mentioned it, the Google Docs style simultaneous editing. You have me going for a second there, thinking about Microsoft and Office, because earlier generation technologically, but that was a bundling thing. Word, Excel, and PowerPoint were not a bundle at one point in time. And then let's put some duct tape around them, add Outlook, and make a whole lot of money off it. And then along comes Google Docs, arguably still not a competitor to Word, in my humble opinion. But that simultaneous editing thing is a big deal. It's like really big deal. Like, wow, I might use Google Docs because we can all, mess with sentences and stuff at the same time. Holy wow, man, that's cool. Right. Yeah. And then I'm sure Word in the Cloud has that now. Yeah. So do you think the CDP label will get subsumed? Like, what are these guys what are these new bundlers? Let's use Twilio as a straw man. Like, what are they gonna do? Are they gonna have to call themselves something to say, bring your marketing here, we'll run it all?
If- Well, if you look, I don't think there aren't too many ESPs that actually use that label to describe themselves anymore,
Fair point.
which I think is silly because brands call them ESPs, and there's almost a stigma to those. So they're ESPs, and
Yeah.
I don't care what they think they want to be. Well, okay, let's go back. You referenced 2 years ago when I spoke at the Email Innovation Summit, and then followed it up with the article in Only Influencers, where I think I was the first to notice this collision course, and I said that already there's a lot of overlap between CDPs and ESPs and in what they do. And then again, this is 2 years ago, and that brands and people looking at these platforms need to be aware of this because it should inform how they go about acquiring one or the other or both, based again on requirements, so that they don't end up over marteching. And when that happens, and when you have your data team with the CDP and your marketing team with the ESP, and both platforms can do some of the same things, you get into crazy, disagreements over who gets to do the segmentation, who gets to do the list.
Right.
There's a danger there. Fast forward 2 years, Gartner Group. You didn't mention it. I'm going to mention them. Gartner Group. Gartner Group, interestingly enough, identified the same trend. Even more interesting, used the exact same Venn diagram that I created for my article presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Gartner, shame on you.
Shame on
But and 2 years too late, because now those platforms have collided.
The circles are going like this, right?
There and where there are ESPs and CDPs that, in my mind, are barely distinguishable from one another, and that's where, to your point, whether we call them CDESPs or ESCDPs in the future, that's the future. And when you look at, and when going back to CDP Institute and their 4 categories of CDPs, the highest level is what they call deployment CDPs. And that would be like Blue Shift and Diamond Data and Ometria. And interestingly enough, they use MTAs in the cloud, but they send campaigns. They don't just send triggered to a ESP to send a campaign. They literally send the campaign. So they do all of the data management and identity resolution and trigger that low base level CDPs do, but they don't need an ESP. And what when I first realized that this, I mean, it even caught me by surprise that already happened, and we were already seeing the aftershock, was when I was advising a very well-known retailer in their RFP. I was advising. I mean, they hadn't hired my company. I liked the guy. And I just, even if they're not going to pay me, I like seeing what their thought process. I like seeing what they're doing. But folks, that doesn't mean I'm going to do free RFPs. But anyway, and he was looking at some of these next gen platforms that we all well known, and he ended up picking Blue Shift. And I kept saying, "You're out of your mind. But you're insane." I use nicer words, but they're a CDP. And he said, "You know what? They look like they can do it the best." So then I looked at Blue Shift much more closely, talked to them, and I said, if they wanted to call themselves an ESP,
they'd be a good
they could.
Yeah.
So then, you look at Blue Shift and you look at Simon Data, and I'm not endorsing anybody here. I want to make that clear, but they're good examples. If you look at those two, and you compare them to a very CDP-esque ESP, Cordial, which was built on a very flexible data platform, and CDP Institute has them on their low. I mean,
Interesting.
half the people on the planet think of Cordial as a CD, but you look at Cordial or Exponia, which was acquired by Bloomreach a year ago. They're real, you look, Cordial, Exponia, Blue Shift, Simon Data. They're two sides of the same coin. They're not a continuum, meaning Blue Shift and Simon Data and others like them are excel at the CDP side of that much more than they excel at the deployment. And Cordial and Exponia excel at the deployment much more than they excel at the data management. But all four of them are doing all of it. And that's what I see, that's where I see at the mid-market, they are one. To your point, what do we call them? I like ESCDP.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
where did I've got thoughts about it, but I want yours because you really know this space. Where did the generation that called themselves Marketing Cloud fit in and match up against this, bundle unbundle collision that we're talking about?
Yeah, a good question. I mean, the marketing clouds, they all sort of emerged in early second decade, 2011, 2012, where, you had companies like Oracle, IBM, and Salesforce. Yeah, IBM was in there too. They had their cloud.
Yeah.
They bought Silverpot, and where what they were trying to do was bundle, offer cloud-based across your entire marketing stack. So it was like, we're going to add email to customer service, to CRM, to whatever. And that was their bundle. What is happening today when you and I are talking about bundling, it's, in my mind, it's the bundling of things. And you were very eloquently said it, that, there's this pulling apart happening in some areas, but the bundling is sort of in response to, that's not necessarily a good thing. So I think the bundling that ESPs are doing today are functionality that brands expect or want.
Yeah.
In what they call an ESP. And so they're two very different trends. And the original bundling trend, I think, there's a changing of the guard that I'm seeing, and that old marketing cloud model it has lost some steam. And, at the C-suite level, it's seen as advantageous.
Yeah.
They're often not deciding who an ESP or a CDP is. At the practitioner level,
yeah,
that the clouds don't add value, but the bundled ESP has value. So when we say, what is getting pulled back in 10 years ago,
yeah,
marketing automation existed as a separate platform. If you really wanted to get good triggers and transactional emails and automated, you had to have a different platform. You had to,
okay. Yeah.
And you had your marketing, marketing automation platform.
Yeah.
And you potentially had to have, somebody doing your real-time or adaptive content at open. And you had somebody doing your send time optimization, third party. And you had somebody doing your mobile, all these things. And what we've seen, even though, and you're right, there's one trend of ripping these things apart.
Yeah.
The stronger trend is bringing them together. And when brands preference by far today is, and they don't want good enough, they want really good enough, but they want, marketing automation, promotional, multi-channel, good email editor, all in one platform.
All in one platform. Well, I suspect I would have to really get under the hood and violate NDAs to get there. But I suspect that one of the issues is this. Let's call Twilio an example of sort of leading edge of rebundle capabilities, because it looks like they're headed there. What the glue that's going to hold those pieces together is a much more 2022 view of making them talk to each other via APIs
Yep.
not actual hard bolted same code base integration. You look at the earlier generation, I think I would bet a lot of the marketing clouds, if we looked under the hood, like the code base is like this. It's not a zillion APIs talking to each other. And as a result of that earlier architecture, their feature progress, their ability to respond to market tastes and so on, like they just can't move as fast. When I talk to customers who are on older gen marketing clouds, they don't tend to be super happy. They're like, we're stuck with this thing and it can't do this and it can't do that. And it's like 2 years down the line before they'll add a button. And yeah, okay, makes sense.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Not all of the older legacy.
Not all.
There are some. So, and I know you're not applying that. I mean, there are some that have done a real good job. Well, and let's Adobe launched Journey Optimizer, brand new platform built from the ground up. Zeta launched the Zeta Marketing ZMP, Zeta Marketing Platform, NetCore. So there are there are ESPs that are considered legacy by a lot of email marketers, but that
they're not
are new technology. And by the way, all three of those have CDPs inside. So
right.
They're while the CDP may not be the core the way it is in a Cordial or a Blue Shift, it's there, it's adjacent, and to your point, the APIs are firing back and forth. So you're getting the same benefit of that CDP capability.
Because no one's ever going to be able to do it. But if you had a chart of all of the RFPs, or you may be able to chart of all the RFPs and buying process resulting in decisions, resulting in who's big in the market. Sometimes there's who's driving the purchase decision? Is it the tech and data guys? Is it the marketing guys? Because their view on what's good and what's required can be quite different based on how they're sort of slicing the world up.
Yeah. And that's what I see. Every RFP we've run the last 2 years, everyone, there's been at the same time, and that's the marketing team at the same time, elsewhere in the organization, the IT and or data team are doing, I kid you not. And which gets back to the danger of, but everyone wants their own platform.
Yeah.
And that's and that's what I think is when you look at the CDP landscape, and again, going back to the 4 different types of CDPs, automation CDP, analytics CDP, I can't remember all their names. And again, the highest degree of evolution, the deployment CDP. But when you look at those and you talk to the vendors that are in the different categories, they will very clearly say, what emerges from that is the 2 lower categories, or the 2, least function categories are the laundry list of IT and data. And so they tend to get bought by IT and data.
Okay. Yeah.
Higher level ones that look more like ESPs.
Yeah.
Are the guys that work for these CDPs say our conversations tend to be, when they're successful, it's because we're talking to the marketing people, because if we're talking to the data and IT people, they're looking at these platforms over here and we know we don't have a chance. And again, I think that's another driver for if I'm an email marketer, I probably would prefer that data and IT doesn't have their own platform to supply me with a lot of what I need.
Yeah.
I'd rather have those capabilities. And I think that that's part of the attraction and part of the impetus driving this. Let's at platforms that do it all. And again, I see that's where it's going. It's starting in the mid-market, just because particularly for the deployment CDPs, they don't have the scale of sending that.
Right.
Again, when you're using MTAs in the cloud, they can scale up pretty quickly. But that's again another impetus that I see driving. Let's bundle even that in, because again, from where I sit, it makes no sense not to.
Right.
It's logical. And here's an interesting sort of bundling thing. Not CDP, but I've been working with and helping a leading mobile player, and they've determined that they're losing business to bundle. Their clients are saying, "You're great, possibly the best, but you're a one-trick pony,
Right.
and we'd like to bundle. We're sorry, we'd like to bundle." And they've realized that as a standalone, they're going to be less successful than
Oh,
if they
interesting.
join up, if they create a bundle themselves. And I think I think they're right. I think those standalone, those standalone platforms again are good at the start because they're the innovators,
Hmm.
but over time, there's other platforms that get good enough in that capability. Maybe
Yeah.
never as
Yeah.
good as a standalone, but good enough that brands say, it's good enough.
Yeah, and it's sort of like the standalone, is like a company that says we are marketing for the text channel only. You could argue there's sort of, and this is a typical thing in the evolution of technologies. Like early on, the label on a tech tends to be the tech. Later on, as it matures, the label tends to be like the function or the value it provides. Like, do you know what kind of CPU is in your computer? I don't anymore. But at one point, it was always Intel inside. And now it's like, I don't care. I want a CPU. In fact, my CPU is in the cloud now. So I really don't know.
I don't know and I don't care. Right. I don't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Are there any wild card players, particularly big? Because we're in an age of some digital monopolies, arguably. Are there anybody? Is there anybody that you think might show up at this party?
It's interesting. I think the era, we went through two waves of consolidations of leading ESPs. We had the 2005, 2004. It had the marketing service providers buying all the leading independent ESPs. Axiom got into the game, Epsilon got in the game, Experian got in the game buying Cheetah Mail.
Mm-hmm.
And out from under that emerged new independent ESPs that were seen as more innovative and more fleet of foot and exact target and responses. And then the marketing cloud, the marketing cloud guys got in the game. They bought up all those
guys.
And then the market was looking around and saying, well, we're the independent guys. Well, now we have the next gen platforms. We've named several of them.
Yeah.
I don't see an industry out there that there would be sort of the run on the independents. Like those other two waves of consolidation, it was like a stampede with somebody, one of your competitors bought an ESP. Okay. I got to get in the game.
Yeah. I got to get in the game. Interesting.
I don't see a category of business now where somebody could come in and say, I'm going to buy one of these next gen and I'm going to start the stampede. So
yeah,
I don't, last big one we saw was SAP acquiring a Marcus a little over a year ago. And, there was no, that didn't kick off a stampede at the time. And I thought, well, okay, the only one, Microsoft has not.
I was gonna ask you about that. Yes.
I think if I'm Microsoft, I'm not sure what my advantage would be to buying an ESP at this point.
Yeah.
They've got the cloud, the data, cloud data. I mean, they're very integrated into what's going on in the industry, Azure and other things. So they're a player in there, and I don't think they need an ESP. I think being more agnostic for them, because brands would look at that and they would go, after they bought the ESP, brands would no matter what ESP it was.
Yeah.
It was the hottest ESP right now on the planet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Microsoft bought it. Brands would be going, you know what?
Yeah.
It's now Microsoft. It's not that Duray. And
well, it's akin to companies backing away from AWS because of the Amazon retail part of it, right?
Right, right, because it's wait, they're a competitor. If
Yeah.
we're,
Yeah.
we're
We're paying our competitor. We're putting our infrastructure on our competitor.
which is a great way. You've just come full circle,
Yeah.
a masterful way to say what will happen if Twilio does become an ESP.
Bang.
Are all of the next gen ESPs that are using them as an MTA
Yeah.
going to say, wait a minute,
Yeah.
we're now competing against you and we're
Yeah.
paying you.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's, that will be interesting because I don't know if I were one of those next gen ESPs, I'd
Yeah.
potentially go looking for an MTA in the cloud
Yeah.
that wasn't affiliated with them.
Well, and Twilio made their bones as, I'm going to geek out here for a second, but Twilio made their bones and fame as the equivalent of an MTA for calls and texting for the they made the SS7 layer, the telephone system of the world, into an API. It was flipping brilliant. Most ESPs who say they've got a texting story will probably have done at least Gen 1 via Twilio. And now what you're saying is they'll be going, hang on a minute, maybe not.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe not.
Yeah.
And the cost, if a Twilio, wonderful company, but if Twilio is maintaining both this new gen ES-CDP and the raw component API pieces to sell to the other competitors in that space, one of those two, either the APIs or the consolidated platform, is got to be playing second fiddle at some point.
Exactly. And there's got to be a lot of friction between them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah. Microsoft had that same battle earlier, much earlier generation, or several generations ago technologically, but Microsoft had that battle with the Win32 APIs on the desktop. Do we keep some of these secrets so only Word and Excel can use them, metaphorically speaking? Or should we go, you know what, this is everything it does, and if you can write a better word processor on Windows and kick our butt, like, good on you, congratulations, we'll still sell Windows.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And the players that we didn't discuss, and it's natural, but it's interesting as well, like, we didn't touch on Google.
Right.
We didn't touch on Apple, who I still think is a funny wild card in this mix with the weird leverage point that they've got and the philosophy about privacy that they've got. I don't see them showing up in the ES-CDP market, but I think everyone will have to grapple with them in that market still.
Yeah. Well, the chart you showed, and this is a whole nother episode, but the chart you showed at that same conference, what was massively eye-opening to, I think, everybody there about the unique role of Apple. It opened my eyes. I was like,
yeah, they're in a weird spot. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
okay.
they're not, they're, I mean, forget that they're different mailboxes. They're at very different points in the email process.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Apple's can really be a choke point to the degree they want.
They really can. I had, long time, like close to 50-year close friends, visiting, on this weekend. And we were sitting there in the morning with coffee and, everyone's doing what they do, news, et cetera, on their mobile device. And I said, Hey, Frank, is your Gmail address the main address? He said, well, no, I use that for, and this is a retired guy. Okay. It's like, I use Gmail, but not that much. I use iCloud for hotels and stuff like that. And I said, what do you actually use on your phone to read your email? He said, well, like the Apple client. And his wife, almost the same thing. And I said, this is interesting. Two retired people, both of whom really don't want to have tech and stuff in their life very much. And like 7 email addresses between them, all coming through their Apple client.
Yeah. So it's right. So, yeah.
Well, we should wrap this up. But man, this is gonna be fascinating to watch. And it's happened. Seems like it's happening now. Would you agree?
Yeah. It's I always go back when we're, I mean, there's so much happening, so interesting. And I think back at points like this in conversations like this to an old boss of mine who was brilliant and a great boss. And in 2010, 2011, he said, Chris, the future's martech. I mean, the future's ad tech, not martech.
Interesting.
He was pretty wrong. And I'm glad I didn't. It was one of the few times
I didn't make the bet.
Yeah. I think, and yeah, we're living through this right now. It's going to be fascinating developments. There's going to be churn. There's going to be acquisitions. There's going to be companies that blow up. But there's going to be tons of confusion. There already is. But coming out the other side, we're going to have platforms, CDPs, which I think you and I now have blessed that. You've used it a couple of times. I like that. CDPs, because the ESP is the foundational element there. But I think we're going to come out with a new series of platforms that are going to make the practitioner's life easier and are going to hopefully provide a better experience to user experience to the people who are receiving emails or loyalty programs. Or we need to get into the next step is customer experience platforms. And they're coming. They're coming. And you know what? Bloomreach, when they bought Exponia, I was like, Frankenstein. Bloomreach, if you're listening, I apologize. That I've come to see. I'm publicly apologizing. I was wrong to criticize that acquisition. I think it was brilliant. And I know one of the reasons I think it's brilliant is I think CX is going to become a bigger part of CDPs world.
Totally agree.
And a big part of that is because of the first party data that CX platforms generate by the tonnage. We both know zero and first party data, whether it's loyalty program, whether it's CX platforms, or whether it's data clouds, are becoming critical competitive pieces in this.
So we just identified what we'll talk about in conversation number 3, Chris.
Okay.
Cool. Well, in the recording, my guest today, which has been wonderful, Chris Marriott, president of Email Connects. Chris, thanks so much for making the time.
Thanks for having me again. I always enjoy these conversations.